we're back on the air, AMS on the air at the AMS 2020 annual meeting, the 100th annual meeting of the AMS. And I'm here with Andy Miller, who's joining the AMS on the air team as a host, especially in policy issues, which is a good thing because Andy knows a lot more about policy than we do. And maybe, Andy, you can explain a little bit about how you got into the policy arena and to AMS on staff at this point.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am a meteorologist by training. I have a PhD in meteorology, but I learned quickly that I was probably not going to end up in academia. And I looked for opportunities to apply my knowledge and passion for meteorology and the climate system in ways that can benefit society overall. And I applied to become a postdoc with the policy program right out of my PhD program, and was fortunate to join them in 2017. And since then, I've been working to help them explain scientists how policy works and politicians how science works in a very simple way. And I think both ways are very important, and both forms of communication are equally hard.
Had you had any experience in political science or politics or joining the program, or was it straight out of a focus only on the science, really?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad at the University of Hamburg, and while I was there, me and a few of my friends started a small NGO that was trying to showcase how our dietary choices have an impact on on the carbon emissions that are produced by society. And so that really got me started on thinking about how the policy process works. We applied to some grants with state agencies and tried to convince the decision makers at the university level to be part of this project. So that was like a first experience in the policy process. And then when I realized in grad school that I probably wanted to be professionally involved in policy, I started talking to people who had done this transition before me, and they gave me some advice on what I could have done or what I could do. And I took a class on environmental law, which was very fascinating to me. And then I took some training outside of that with student groups and other ways to kind of get myself up to speed.
What are some of the things you would suggest to other scientists who might want to make this transition that you've seen so far that would be valuable to have if you're starting to look in the policy arena, looking for advocacy jobs or policy or other kinds of non-research jobs that have an impact like that?
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways you can do this, not to advertise only our own products, but one of the major ways you can do it, especially as a student, is you can apply to the summer policy colloquium that the AMS policy program is organizing every summer, and applications are going to open soon. And grad students can get this 10-day experience for free, which is worth multiple $1,000s. And it really gives you a deep dive into all sorts of agencies, into the legislative branch, the executive branch, and really you can learn a lot about what you might want to do, or really equally importantly, what you don't want to do. There are other opportunities like the AAAS fellowship program, which gives people an opportunity to work for a year on the Hill or up to 2 years in the executive branch. And the other thing that I can't emphasize enough is to learn about communication, like learn about how to write, learn about how to talk about science in a way that is accessible to non-scientists, because you're going to have to do that in some way if you leave the academic sector.
That's one of the reasons why we're glad you're on board with AMS on the air, because I think that this kind of communication is conducive, right, to making the case and getting out there with messages that can be understood by people who are making policy. Because my understanding with communicating with policymakers is they have so little time. They're very, very bright. They absorb a lot of information. They have a lot of competing interests. But it's a special kind of encapsulation of information, and not just argumentative or persuasive communication as much as just getting through to people who have so much to deal with.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I want to be very clear, the AMS policy program is not an advocacy organization. We are not trying to get bills passed. We're not trying to get the budget of NOAA to a certain number. We are really trying to inform the policy process, because our belief is that given the best information, politicians have to make value choices, and those value choices are really independent of scientific content. That being said, I think you're absolutely right that many decision makers have to make decisions on an incredible breadth of topics, and so it can be disappointing to the individual when they only get a very short amount of time or very little attention to their topic. But it's important to recognize that, a senator might make a vote on war and peace on one day and healthcare the next day, and then the budget for the National Weather Service the third day, or all of those votes on the same day. And so you have to be concise, and you have to make a case that sticks with people. So you can't just throw scientific information at people. You have to connect that to a story, and you have to connect that to the place that people really care about, because especially in the US, politics is very place-based, right? We have representatives that are elected by a state or a very small district. Mm-hmm. So you need to be able to connect science to that district in a way that is compelling to an office.
What kinds of experiences have been helpful in developing techniques for that kind of communication on the job? What kinds of things do you do where you learn?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things you can do is really go through it, right? So talk to politicians, talk to their staffers, take some communication courses where you can, and then write as much as you can and have as many interactions as you can, and you get better as you do it. And you see people who you admire doing it, and learn from their techniques. And I think you need to be humble, right? Don't assume that you have the solution already figured out because you're a great scientist. There's a big step from being a good scientist to being an effective communicator of scientific information.
Now, I should put a shameless plug in for BAMS at this point for what you've contributed already to some of these stories about how to communicate, right? To the AMS members. They should look in BAMS for your own contributions.
Yeah, thank you. And you can see also on our website, not everything makes it to BAMS, not even when it comes from another AMS office. We have studies where we look into different issues. So, for example, 2 years ago, I started on a topic on water resource management. This past year, we have looked into what will the jobs of the future look like. So how will new technologies like a changing media landscape and artificial intelligence, but also societal drivers like a new push for diversity and inclusion and international developments, how will all those things affect the kind of jobs people in our community will have and have?
Maybe you could explain a little bit. In both cases, like water resources, every representative or every lawmaker, decision maker must understand that water is important to their constituents. It's a local issue, not just a national issue, whatever. So how do you, what are you looking for in terms of information that you need to get to them? What do they need from AMS policy program to make a difference on a topic that you would think would be so well known already?
So it is true that everyone knows that water is important, but the issues related to water are very different depending on where you are. So in the east of the United States, usually the question is how to get rid of too much water. Right? We have many more problems with flooding than we have with droughts in the east. In the west, that is a completely different topic. Right? If you're in a mountainous region, maybe you care more about glaciers. They're also managed very differently. The U.S. has a very complicated system of federal and state agencies that is responsible to manage water. and water resources. And so what we try to do is to showcase the system that is in place and then see where scientific information from the AMS community can be most helpful. So there's a real push across the country now to really advance forecasting that goes beyond 2 weeks. Because managing water resources is very difficult, especially when it comes to droughts on timescales of 2 weeks. You really need information on 4 weeks, 6 weeks, even like 3 or 4 months to be effective that way.
So seasonal and subseasonal scales are really important. We're seeing a lot of papers on that in this meeting, and on also papers on how water resource management should take hold of that information and make use of forecast-based decisions as opposed to decisions based on past information.
Yeah, until very recently, some federal agencies were particularly or explicitly forbidden to use that type of information. They made information based on the water level of the river. They were not allowed to use forecasts to manage rivers.
How does that get changed? I mean, as a policy, how does that get changed?
It's a slow process, but it is finally happening. The U.S. Corps of Engineers has adapted its management documents after many years of advocacy work from many of the agencies that deal with the U.S. Corps in decisions.
Wow. So you feel like your report was a little part of that revolutionary process right there?
I'm not sure that it was, but it definitely didn't hurt, right?
Right.
I mean, you try to inform as many people as possible, as well as you can, and then count on them to make the right decisions.
So your study on workforce diversity requirements and future sort of projecting where that's going, what kinds of findings did you come up with there?
Yeah, I think one of the major findings, to me personally at least, was that it is really up to us to decide how technology will affect us, right? There's no natural law that can determine how AI replaces jobs or how cloud computing affects the way we work. It's based on our decision making to figure out how we can really take advantage of the positive sides of these technologies and avoid the negatives that are undoubtedly associated with them. So that is, I think, a really empowering message, that there is not like a wave coming at us and we just have to sit there and hope that it goes over well, but we have to make decisions very actively and think about what we want those technologies to be good for and where we want to like maybe slow them down or be careful about. The other thing I would say is that it becomes even more clear to me every day that there's a lot of meteorology jobs out there, or more broadly weather, water, climate jobs out there, but they become less centralized. There's more companies involved in the field, but often those companies have meteorology not even in their name. They might be an energy company that is hiring a few meteorologists, or they might be an insurance company that hires a few climate experts. And I think for us as a society, that is really a challenge for the future to look at, to think about how we include these people in our community that aren't working for like the big employers that we're usually representing here.
Do people know these opportunities exist? You're a prime example, in a way.
Yeah, I think they're starting to learn about it, and I know that I've worked with Kelly Savoy in our new workforce development department on this, and she's working very hard to inform as many people as possible about the opportunities that AMS has to offer, and on the other hand, inform our students where they can go, because I think many of them still think of the classic career choices as weather forecasting, broadcasting, and don't really know how many other opportunities there are.
Well, it's a good example of how coming to an AMS conference or getting in contact with Kelly's program at AMS is a way of not just sitting and waiting for the wave to happen, but to ride it and see where it takes you. And I can see it's taken you into some interesting directions. So where are we going to ride your interests in terms of the policy program and your podcasting on AMS on the Air?
Yeah, so I think our idea is to supplement what you have done so successfully at AMS on the Air with some voices from DC that we have access to much easier than the rest of our staff, and really some topics that I'm really interested in, or we as an office are very interested in, is the continuous development of public and private partnerships, where the roles are constantly changing. What is really the role of the government in our community? What is the role of private companies? Another one that is near and dear to my heart as somebody who came here from Germany are international collaborations. So I've had conversations with the World Bank and with other international organizations like the WMO, and people there ask really complicated but very interesting and powerful questions. So one example, now companies take a lot more observations themselves and not just governments. That raises really difficult questions about data sharing internationally. If the companies own the data, not the governments, are we still going to exchange information as freely as we used to?
Well, these sound like great issues, and thanks for joining our team, Andy, and enjoy the conference too while we're at it, right?
All right, thank you so much.